So, welcome everybody. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a topic that is really very broad and is something that is so key and critical to what platforms like brightpod.com are trying to do. And that's trying to help people connect and support each other and support their loved ones and family members and friends and advocate for them through serious illnesses and life-threatening illnesses. Um, it is a topic that I could probably spend hours on, and I'm going to try and do it in 20 to 25 minutes. So I'm just going to scratch the surface here. As always, I'm going to have everybody on mute. If you have a question, there should be a little hand-raising function, or you can try and signal me. At the end of the presentation, there'll be a period of time where I can take questions and answer questions as well. And I always welcome participation. I think that forums like this work the best when, as a community, we share our experiences together. So this is the brightpod.com platform. My name is Jonathan Agan. My credentials are on the first page there, Advocacy and Caregiver Group 101, supporting someone through a serious or life-threatening illness. Apologize tonight. For some reason, my computer is not appreciating the little pictures that I drop into all of my slides, so hopefully I'll get that taken care of for next time. Briefly, in terms of what we're going to go through, I'm going to talk about the issues here. Then I'm going to go on to the basics of support, how to advocate for somebody with life-threatening or serious illness, when and how to say no, considerations, and then questions. The issues with respect to supporting somebody with a life-threatening or critical illness, well, you'll notice I don't have a slide for that because there really are no issues. It's a matter of you as a human being come into contact with family and friends all the time, and individuals who you are an acquaintance with that may need support. For me, it was my daughter, my 27-month-old daughter, who was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. I get to know some of the faces and names each week here in and out. A lot of people know my story. I didn't really have a choice in terms of whether or not to help support my daughter. She was my daughter. But there's a lot of other people that we do come into contact with that we have to support, want to support, need to support, or just as a human being with a moral obligation, want to try and help and support. So issues, there really aren't any issues. There's some considerations. There's some things to keep in mind as you are supporting somebody and to what level and degree you try and support someone. But there aren't any issues. So we're going to move past that. This is a very packed slide, and frankly, I could have put, many, many more points on it. The basics of supporting somebody, sounds simple. Supporting somebody through a life-threatening or serious illness. But there's some things to keep in mind that, depending on who the person is, depending what age they are, things to keep in mind that will be important and help you maintain a relationship with the person and help you individually, because not only are you helping somebody out, you can also actually get a lot out of supporting somebody, and you can also experience a lot of emotional issues as well as you do so. It's key and critical to listen and learn as much about the illness, listen to the person. You don't have to take everything on your shoulders, though. So as you're communicating with the family member or loved one, friend, acquaintance, coworker, 9 times out of 10, they just want to be heard. They want somebody to communicate with. They don't always want or need something. The second point is something that I think if more people understood this, people would feel more supported. Don't just ask what somebody wants or needs, find out. Don't make the person figure out how you can support them. So, oftentimes as we go through life, you're in a crisis, you're in a medical crisis, your family member, your loved one is in a medical crisis, your friend is in a crisis, serious illness, whatever the diagnosis may be. How many times do you say to somebody, what do you need? How can I help you? What can I do for you? Most people generally reply, nothing, or I don't know. And then that person's forced to think about what they may need, or they may be embarrassed to ask, or they may not want to ask. They may have so much pride that they don't want to ask for something. If they need support with meals, if they need a ride to the clinic or the hospital, if they need somebody to watch their children, if they just need an ear, whatever it is, try and listen. Go back to the first point. Find out what it is they're going through, and then that can help you guide what you can provide. Of course, it's human nature to say to that person, what do you need? How can I help you? Is there anything I can do for you? With the case of a child or a spouse or a close loved one, generally you can figure out what they need in most cases, but the more you spend time with somebody, the more you can get to know what they need. Validate what they're feeling. If somebody tells you that they're scared or that they've been told that they have no more options for treatments left, or that they've been given 6 months or a year and they're scared, or if they're going through something that isn't necessarily life-threatening, but a very serious illness and they're afraid of dying or they're afraid of losing their job, whatever it is, it really doesn't matter. The more you can validate the person and support them in that role as somebody who's just listening to them and telling them that you can only imagine what it feels like, the more supported they will feel. Know when they need space. There's points and times where the person might want a breather, and you may have very good intentions. In the case of a young child like I dealt with, there really wasn't a time when I felt that she needed space or sensed that she needed space. She needed to be cared for. As people get older, I know cases of adolescents and teenagers and young adults diagnosed with cancer and life-threatening illnesses that they just need their space and their time. And that's okay. And that's nothing against you individually. It shouldn't be about you. It's about the person that you're helping. Know when to push them and know when to back off. This is a very difficult principle to come to grips with, because you don't want to, and it dovetails in with point number 6 about don't get frustrated. Supporting somebody through a serious or life-threatening illness it takes tremendous patience to be able to deal with that person and to be able to be there for the person through the best and the worst that they're dealing with. And if somebody is on a medication, let's say they have high blood pressure or they have diabetes, and without that medication, they certainly are going to end up in some serious health issues. By all means, you can push them, but know when to not push, know when to back off. And ultimately, in that kind of a situation, it's up to the person to decide for themselves. They have to want to take the medication. So that is a difficult thing to arise at in terms of trying to figure out when to push and when to back off. And getting frustrated is very easy. By way of my experience dealing with a child that isn't capable of making her own health decisions. She was on a regimen of about 20 different supplements. And there were points in times when she simply refused to take her supplements. I thought that they were helping her. I don't know ultimately in the end whether they were or not. I got frustrated at points in times when she wouldn't take them. And I used to chase her around the house to try and get her to take those supplements. And it just, sometimes your frustration levels can injure a relationship and you can lose your efficacy as a support network. Be careful about imposing your opinions. And this, I find, is very, very easy to have happen to you when you have a support network of multiple individuals. I've talked about this before in terms of all the people that come out of the woodwork and try and tell you that they know the cure for cancer, or they have the cure for diabetes, or whatever the illness or the diagnosis is, and they try and impose their opinions on you of what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. It feels bad. And you start questioning and second guessing your role as a caregiver and what you're doing. Are you doing enough? Why aren't you doing some of these things that these people are very convicted about imposing their viewpoints upon you? You never want to impose your viewpoint upon somebody that you're caring for. From personal experience, it doesn't feel good. There is a clinic that is in Houston that people in the brain tumor community that I'm involved in, it's a very divisive treatment. There are people that think that it is a cure, and there are people that want to see the doctor go to jail. And when the debates arise on the social media networks and some of the community support groups, they can get extremely ugly. There's people out there that are trying to tell other parents that if they're not taking their children to this clinic, they're basically dooming their child to death. Imposing your opinion like that on somebody, especially a parent that's trying to do everything possible to save their child, is really damaging. Be careful about providing false hope. And also, by the same token, don't bring the person's hope down. Hope is a word that has balance to it, in my opinion and in my experience. Even though I was told that my daughter was terminal the day she was diagnosed, I always had hope. Hope that she would be one of the very, very rare few in the world that are known to be survivors of the type of cancer that she had. Hope that they would find something, the researchers, the scientists, the doctors would find some drug or drugs to cure her or to prolong her life so that somebody would find a new drug. Hope that she'd see another day. I didn't want somebody providing me false hope, though. And there were a lot of people that I either knew or tried to connect with me, again, that told me that they had the cure, that I should be giving her this oil or this supplement, or she had to be taking this treatment because that was the hope. And I actually investigated and looked at every single avenue that was provided. Thankfully, the people that were closest to my daughter and to myself and her mother weren't trying to push false hope on us, but I've seen it happen, and it is a very, very dangerous thing. By the same token, you've got to be careful, especially when you're dealing with an instance where somebody is terminal. And in my role with the Max Cure Foundation, a childhood cancer organization, I counsel other parents who have children diagnosed with cancer, and a good amount of those children die, unfortunately. I always try and provide the parents hope. And again, it might be big H hope or small H hope, but I never try and give that parent either false hope or tell them that they have no hope, because I don't know what's going to happen. If you believe in God and you believe that God is such that he's the creator, or God is the creator of the universe, I'm not God. I know that. So I can't tell you what's going to happen with your child. I can't tell you what's going to happen with, my mother has MS, and she has probably about 10 other conditions associated with her MS and the progression. She's been battling for 20, 30 years, somewhere around there. I can't tell you what's going to happen with her disease. So, people have to arrive at their own location and their own destination with the concept of hope. But as a support mechanism, as a caregiver, just understand that you can play a significant role in the person's psychosocial aspect of their entire treatment plan. Don't stay away. If you start supporting somebody, and this is obviously not something that, if it's your child or it's a very close family member, the scenarios where you may stay away are rare. I've known people that it's happened, unfortunately, but I've seen instances where when somebody is diagnosed or somebody needs support, people stay away, and it can be isolating. It can be lonely. Certainly, if you start supporting somebody, then please don't run away. Please don't stay away. Again, I think that everything comes together in terms of the components of care. There's the traditional medical aspect of the care, the drugs, the treatments. There's the the financial aspects associated with going through a life-threatening illness. But then there's the mental, the psychosocial aspect. And having people support you, being a support mechanism, can actually help somebody's recovery. It can help somebody's attitude as they go through chemotherapy, as they undergo treatments which are altering their physical appearance. If you suddenly start staying away, it can have a significant impact upon the person's psychological process and be damaging. No one you personally needs space, though, and this comes right after number 9, where I say don't stay away. You also have to take care of yourself, and to be effective as a support mechanism, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, a coworker, a peer, doesn't matter. You still are undergoing a significant amount of strain and weight on your shoulders. And you may need space sometimes. You've got to judge the situation and the person that you're supporting as to whether or not they can hear that truth. If the truth is that you need a breather and they can handle that truth and they have other support mechanisms, then you should always be honest. But just understand that you're going to undergo certain psychological impacts upon your life. And then finally, Um, and not finally in terms of the basics of support, because there's a whole lot more that I could talk about, but I've talked about in some of my other presentations, including, providing meals, helping them to fundraise to pay for bills, other aspects of support that are necessary. The final aspect that I want to talk about tonight on this the basics of support, is talking about death, knowing how to talk about death. If the individual you are supporting is facing death and they're discussing the topic and talking about it, then the door's open to have a conversation about the topic. My suggestion, my recommendation is get some advice in terms of how to properly talk to somebody about the topic of death. It may be something you're very comfortable dealing with and have dealt with in other contexts. But with that said, it is a topic that needs to be approached lightly and follow the lead of the person. Obviously, if the person you're supporting isn't talking about death, or wants to talk about the topic, then tread lightly. It's a very, very difficult subject to deal with, especially when you're dealing with a loved one that is facing death. I believe I was very fortunate not to have that conversation with my daughter, being as young as she was. But I know parents that had to have that conversation, and children that talked about death with their parents. I'm glad that I didn't, but just do some research, do your homework, talk to some people, get some help. Okay. Part of supporting somebody through a life-threatening or serious illness is advocating for them. I realize that last slide I went long on, but there are so many different facets to that subject of support that I want to take some time there. So advocating means trying to assist them in achieving a certain goal. And so let me just dive right into it. Number one, know your role. What are you supposed to be advocating for? Has the person you're supporting asked you to help them in some fashion? Have they asked you to help them obtain a drug? Have they asked you to help them obtain financing, funding, money to help pay their bills, to help pay their rent? What is it that they need advocacy for? Is it to try and get their records, their x-rays, their scans to a different doctor or to a different clinic? And you need to help them advocate to get seen. Know your role, know what's being asked of you. Also, know what you can and cannot accomplish. Again, the concept of false hope is significant here. One of the avenues of support / advocacy when it comes to patients with serious and life-threatening illnesses is obtaining drugs that aren't approved by the FDA, what's known as compassionate use, compassionate care. It is a complicated process that involves going to the FDA, having your clinician write a letter to the FDA as well as the drug manufacturer, and going to the drug manufacturer and trying to obtain the drug. It's not to be attempted by folks who don't have an understanding of the process. So if you're in a situation where you're supporting somebody through a life-threatening or serious illness and they know about a drug that they want to try and they ask you to help, don't tell them that you can accomplish it if you can't. Just know your limitations. Also, HIPAA considerations need to be thought about. Do you need to obtain somebody's medical records? If it's your child's medical records, that's a no-brainer. If it's a friend, if it's a colleague, somebody outside of a direct family member, then you're going to have HIPAA forms filled out by the person and signed by the person. um, before you ever get your hands on records or are able to communicate with healthcare professionals, clinicians, researchers that are working to try and provide treatment. They won't talk to you until they're satisfied that HIPAA has been covered. And that's, I'm sure most of you are aware of what HIPAA is, but essentially it's protecting everybody here from our information and our records being released. It's a healthcare information privacy act that is designed to protect our information. Know when you should not advocate. Again, what are you being asked as an advocate, as a support for this individual? Are you being asked to do something that is, illegal? Are you being asked to do something that is not in the best interest of the person that you're supporting? There are going to be points and times when either you can't accomplish what you're being asked to do, or you just shouldn't do what you're being asked to do. I'm thinking of scenarios that I'm aware of where people, before medical marijuana and cannabis oil became widely used and accepted in a lot of different contexts, I know a lot of parents that were out there growing their own or obtaining their own through different channels. And, are you comfortable doing that? It's something you have to figure out yourself. Know how to not harm the clinical relationship. If the person you're supporting as a caregiver or as an advocate asks you to interface with their clinical team, you have to understand, again, what your role is and put aside your own personal feelings sometimes. If the clinical team or the doctor or the researcher isn't providing you the information or isn't willing to look at the patient, that's frustrating. That's very, very difficult to accept. But by the same token, understand that you're not the patient, and if there is a potential harm down the road to that clinical relationship, you have to be careful about what you do and what you say. Finally, know when you're being asked to do something you cannot do. And I guess this is really goes back to number 2. And as you enter into a caregiver or a support role, you should be able to tell what your capacity is and what your capabilities are, but you should also be able to know when you're being asked to do something as an advocate that you can't do. And so the two go hand in hand. A little bit redundant, but there's a little bit of a nuance.
Jonathan, I was wondering if I could ask a question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that one way to be helpful is to help with the fundraising. If someone who is caring for a friend or a family member had, for instance, a life-threatening disease such as cancer, what suggestions could you make in service of fundraising, especially for people really who aren't professionals and maybe who don't have any prior experience with someone else, helping someone else who's been sick before?
Sure. That's a good question. And I guess I did glance right over that. And that was the topic of another presentation I gave. So fundraising is a topic that could take a very long time to go through, but nowadays we're all connected here through the platform that's provided for this community. And there are so many different platforms available, online crowdfunding platforms that can be set up very, very quickly. If, for instance, you're trying to raise money for a treatment that isn't covered by insurance, a drug that isn't covered by insurance, or out-of-pocket expenses, if you have a high deductible, if you do have insurance. a lot of these crowdfunding sites like GoFundMe and off the top of my head, I'm blanking on some of the others that I provided when I did do the presentation. But there are any number of platforms available to create a fundraising site that can be up and operational very quickly. Obviously, then it's incumbent upon you to put the information out there on your social media channels and connect with others so that you can get donations to help support your family or a friend or colleague, whoever it is. But that's one way. Fundraising for research, if you have a very rare disease, and I've seen parents that have actually fundraised to have their child's cancer genetically analyzed and create animal models, mouse models, for the cancer to actually be implanted in so that they can screen drugs on a very similar animal model. It's called preclinical testing. And that can cost anywhere between $2,000 to $6,000 per mouse. You have to get the genetic material, and then you have to get the drugs. So I've seen parents go out there and go to foundations, nonprofit foundations, and write grants to obtain the money and the funding to have the material analyzed so that they can actually try and find drugs. Fundraising for meals, fundraising for rent, fundraising for various aspects of support, again, through crowdfunding or through organizations that are out there that can assist, that offer specific grants. It's a good question. It's a topic that, again, I could spend a lot more time on, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an answer there. Mm-hmm. I can take some more questions at the end. I'm gonna try and run through the last two slides here very quickly, and then take some questions, and hopefully got some good interaction. One of the biggest components of being a support mechanism for somebody else is know when and how to say no. I touched a lot on the last slide about advocating and when to and when not to, and assessing your capacity. But it's okay to say no, that you can't support somebody in a certain fashion. You're not a bad person if you say no. What kind of relationship do you have with the individual? If this is your child, if this is your spouse, you're not going to be able to provide 100% of the support that the individual needs. And that's okay too, because you're human. And you have to understand that. But it's okay to say no. Does the person have any other support for themselves? We're emotional creatures, humans. We want it, most of us, and especially those that are connecting through this community, are here to help people. And it's tough for us to say no. And I have a significant problem with saying no because I know what I went through. I know what I experienced. And having somebody to actually help is significant. If you say no, you've got to figure out whether or not your relationship is going to be negatively affected. This didn't necessarily happen during the course of my daughter's illness, but after she died, unfortunately, people vanished. Friends that were there, that were, sitting in her room, holding vigil with her mother and I, were gone. Those are relationships that are negatively affected because of the decision that they made afterwards. We tried to ask them what happened, and nothing. You can be harmed too. You are taking on an emotional component as a supporter and a caregiver of somebody with a serious or life-threatening illness, and it will have an impact upon you. You have to assess what that impact does. If you have a family, what are you being asked to do? Are you being asked to put your family aside to help or support somebody? These are questions that only you can answer, frankly. And are the expectations of the person that you're supporting unreasonable? And again, what are they asking you to do? Are they asking you to be with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? If it's your child and they live with you, then obviously, you're going to be with that person for all that time. You need to take a break too, but just figure out whether the expectations are unreasonable. I'm going to move on to the final slide here, which is something I like to call considerations. And there really aren't many considerations here outside of what we've discussed. I say see previous slides because I think that gives you a good idea of some of the considerations that occur when you are acting as a support mechanism for somebody. And then think about it this way. If you are supporting somebody through a difficult time, through a life-threatening illness, somebody who is in late stages and in hospice care, palliative care, think about what you would want if you were the individual. If it was you, what elements of support do you think you would want? What you would want and what you can think that you would need, it's a pretty good chance that would be the same thing for whoever you're supporting. So again, a lot of material to cover there. And, I know it was trying to go through things as quickly as possible here. So I appreciate everybody's time and patience. I'm going to unmute everybody, and hopefully if there are questions, please feel free to speak up. And if you want to share any experiences, that would be great too. So thank you. Any questions?
Jonathan, have you ever thought why it is that so many young kids are presenting with cancer?
Sure. That's a very good question. And the organization that I work for, the Max Secure Foundation, may start looking into the issue of causation. A lot of people have looked into that. You can think it as environmental changes, or think of it as just chemicals in the environment. I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not quite sure. Obviously, it's a chicken and egg situation. If we knew what was causing the cancers to develop and the incidence rates to increase, then we could attack it from that direction. In the case of my daughter, it was most likely something in her genes, a genetic mutation that she had that wasn't genetically passed on by her mother or myself. But, in all of our combinations of genes, there's X number of mutations that can occur. And most likely a mutation occurred and allowed the cancer to form. I don't know. It's a very good question, but I don't know.
Have you ever heard of the term or word phyllodes?
I have, yeah. Yeah. I can't, off the top of my head, I've heard the term a number of times. It's not coming to my mind though, in what context. And I may have even seen it on an on either an X-ray or ultrasound report a couple days ago.
Yeah, both of them. Yeah.
So.
The reason I asked that question is because both of my granddaughters who were under the age of 16 was diagnosed with it. And it had to be removed.
Okay.
Apparently it happens in the breast area.
Mm-hmm.
But after the pathology came back and they were non-cancerous.
Okay.
Yeah. It just developed from within 2 weeks of each other.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have they had any other genetic testing?
Mm, no, but they have to have testing like every 3 months.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely, obviously, that's something to be monitored, and
Yeah.
the extent that their doctors can push through any other genetic testing, if there's any concern, that would be something that I would want to see, is if there's any type of underlying genetic component that is questionable or concerning. So,
Okay.
thing. Any other questions? Anybody else want to share any experiences as a caregiver, as anything that I may have missed that you think is important when supporting somebody?
Hold on a second. Jonathan, you spoke about being an advocate and being available to others and stuff like that. But do you find that sometimes most people just need someone to listen to them, and actively listen, not listen to give a response or anything like that? What do you think about that?
100%, absolutely. When you are going through something that is a serious illness, it's isolating, and having an ear to listen to, and as I think you hit the nail on the head, having somebody with an active ear that's willing to listen to you, is it can be a significant psychological boost to try and show the person that they're not alone. Let's face it, doctors and clinicians, when you go to the doctor, go to the clinic, and especially cancer centers, they don't have the time to sit and talk, and the social workers are so overworked and have huge caseloads that there really isn't much time for them to sit and talk and handhold. So as a support mechanism, lending an ear is huge. And just listening. Absolutely.
When you were talking about hope, not having, not giving someone too much hope or false hope, but not suggesting that their case is hopeless, how can you provide hope to someone who doesn't have health insurance, who doesn't have money, who really doesn't have experience, who doesn't have really almost any advantage in life, and knowing full well how important hope is in a person's recovery and treatment? What are some things you can do, or some things you can say to a person in those circumstances to help him or her?
Sure. The first thing I'll say is, a lot of the parents that I talk to have children diagnosed with the same type of tumor that my daughter had, which is, it's 99.9% fatal, which means that the second you're given the diagnosis, you're terminal. And all you have to do is put in Google DIPG, or diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. And every single thing that you read about it is that it is universally fatal, terminal from the get-go. When I talk to a parent of a newly diagnosed child, and I'll turn to the main part of your question, because I think this is illustrative of how to provide hope in a situation that may seem hopeless, is I always talk about the research that's being done. I talk about the changes that I've seen since my daughter was diagnosed in 2008, and when she died in January of 2011, the hope and the research and the funding that's happening. And I always try and give parents the understanding that their child could be one of the 12 or 14 that the community has identified as actual long-term survivors. Why not? Why not their child? I mean, they know the battle they're facing. They know what the literature says. They know what the researchers and clinicians are telling them. But they need to be able to get out of bed every single morning, look their child in the eye, and normalize it and try and give their child the best life possible. And you can only do that with hope. Obviously, I don't ever tell a parent that, oh, no, there's going to be a cure found. Don't worry. It's going to happen and your child's going to be saved. They know the odds that they're facing. In terms of somebody that has little access to care or treatment, doesn't have insurance, has really poor insurance, doesn't have anybody to assist them, what would I tell them? I would tell them that, hope is a very dangerous thing. A little hope goes a long way. And trying to connect with others at the clinic where they're being treated, at the hospital, at their doctors, talking to the nursing staff, talking to anybody there, and trying to get somebody to listen to them and lend them an ear, trying to get to people that can work with them and help them, trying to get to people through their spiritual community, their church, their mosque, their synagogue, whatever it may be. There's where hope can grow. A family that I helped assist, they were recent immigrants from Ethiopia. The mother and father were professionals. The mother was an RN, the father was a pharmacist in Ethiopia. Two little girls, one was 4, the other was 2 when they moved here. They moved into a 1-bedroom apartment, and in good times were barely covering their rent. And shortly after, the father arrived with their older daughter, she was diagnosed with the same tumor that my daughter had. They had Medicaid. They were being denied left and right various elements of coverage. They talked to a social worker, and the social worker remembered me. And the social worker reached out to me, and from there, one of the foundations that I work for, the Max Cure organization, we helped support them, and I helped get 4 or 5 other organizations together that I was aware of to support them, and had their rent covered for a couple of years, got their green cards taken care of, got the child buried, unfortunately. You never know who you're going to talk to, when you're going to connect with somebody that can assist you, and where that hope is going to arise. There's always hope. So.
Die?
Yes. Any other questions, comments?
Yes.
Well, I wanted to thank everybody for joining tonight. It's a topic that I think really fits well with what this platform is trying to do, which is creating a support mechanism. And frankly, let me say this: joining communities like this that provide an outlet for people to connect can actually provide you with your support if you don't have your support, and can assist you in navigating some of these challenges that arise in the context of fighting a serious, critical, or life-threatening illness. So if you're able to get to a library, you can sign on. If you have a computer, have connection to the internet, then you can join communities like Brightbot, join in on the web, see if there's a Yahoo or Google group, and send a message. You never know where hope is going to come from. So again, thanks for joining. Appreciate it very much. Log on to brightbot.com, and please, if you haven't done so already, please join my support group, and see everybody next time. Thank you.